Hey, y'all. Welcome to Cross Politics Spotlight. Special show with special guests. Just me and the guests. Not Knox, not Toby, just me and the guests. So thank you for joining us. Our conference is just about a week away. Our Fight Laugh Feast conference in Nashville, Tennessee. You can go to fightlaughfeast.com to sign up for it. Don't miss it. We're very excited about it. You know, it starts with a pre-conference, pre-business makers conference on Thursday, Beer and Psalms Thursday night, and then all the way through Saturday. Pastor Wilson, George Grant, Larry Taunton, David Bonson, a whole host of speakers. We're doing a couple things new this year, always trying to do something different. So come and check us out, fightlaughfeast.com. Bring the whole family. It's going to be a blast. I have with me today, Chris Skates spent 30 years in both nuclear, coal, and natural gas fueled power generation facilities. He is what's wrong with the green agenda. He's began his career over at Georgia Power Company in 1986, working at both their nuclear power plants. And in 2016, Chris was appointed speechwriter and energy advisor to Governor Matt Bevin of Kentucky, whom he served for 4 years. Chris is the author of 4 novels and a new collection of short series. He's here to talk about this book, Moonshine Over Georgia. That's right, Moonshine Over Georgia. Based on the real-life investigation of his revenue agent grandfather, Agent C.E. Miller. Agent C.E. Miller, including Agent Miller's role in the famous case of John Wallace, that was tried right there in the room using the same furniture and all that stuff. Pretty exciting stuff. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show, man, to talk about your book, Moonshine Over Georgia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to let you do a quick summary, but then before we kind of get into the book by book, I want you to maybe tie it into why maybe it's relevant to now. So first start off with kind of a summary of the book and what, obviously it's a family relation here of your grandfather, great-grandfather, and everything. So why don't you summarize the book and then we'll get into why it maybe even matters now. Go ahead.
Sure. And that's a great lead in. So I'll tell this story through the words of my grandfather because it tells it best. I was constantly in his shadow. He was my hero. He taught me everything I know about the outdoors. I was about 11 or 12, and we had a daily ritual when I would stay with him during the summers watching the Andy Griffith Show. Mm-hmm. And a character came on one of the episodes named Rafe Hollister, who was only on about 5 episodes. And in this particular episode, he was making moonshine, and Otis was trying to buy it without Andy finding out. I noticed my grandfather began to fidget in his chair and get irritated. He was in his mid to late 70s at this time. And all of a sudden, he just reached up and abruptly turned the TV off. And I said, "Pop, what's wrong? Aren't we going to finish the show?" And he said, "It wasn't like that, boy. There was nothing funny about the moonshine business."
Yeah.
And he said, "You think you've heard a little child cry? Wait till you pick up their daddy out of some ditch, and he's sick off bad moonshine. He's thrown up on himself. He's peed his pants. And you take him home to some shack." He said, "Your generation doesn't even know what poverty is. People back then were dirt poor. And you take him home to some shack, and his little children are running around in the yard at midnight, crying because their bellies are hurting because they haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. Bellies distended from hunger. And then your daddy just spent all the grocery money on a gallon of moonshine. That's when you hear a child cry." Oof. And I knew when he told me that story, I'm going to tell this guy's story someday. So he was a very devout Christian. He grew up very much like a pioneer child. He had 5 sisters. He was sent out at 6 years old to hunt and fish, not for recreation, for survival in the swamps of northern Florida. He became an expert marksman, an expert at navigating in the deep woods. So when he got to be an adult, he first tried to actually make it as a baseball player. He's a very good first baseman, but not good enough for the majors. And so then he ended up selling dental equipment for a while. And then he found out that the state of Georgia were hiring guys to hunt moonshiners.
Okay.
And he already hated alcohol. So he took a job as a revenue agent and was extremely good at it. He first got hired during Prohibition in the 30s.
Okay.
But then he did the job for 15 years. And probably, I don't even know how many stills he busted and how many arrests he made, in the hundreds.
Okay.
But I was able to find a moonshiner. Well, I'll show you this real quick because this leads into the story.
Yeah.
This is a commendation from the governor of Georgia in 46. You can see the raised seal there.
Yeah.
It says, "This is to commend you, Agent Miller, for rounding up the Upson County liquor gang."
Okay.
And my grandfather had told me a lot of stories, but I didn't know about the Upson County liquor gang. And I was like, okay, that's the coolest darn thing I've ever heard of. So I start doing all kind of research with the Upson County Historical Society and going through archives and looking at newspaper microfilm. And I found the last surviving member of the Upson County liquor gang in a nursing home in Panama City Beach, Florida.
Wow.
He was 93 when I interviewed him.
Okay.
And the first question I asked him was, I knew he was in that region during that time period, but I didn't know if he had ever run into my grandfather.
Right.
So I'm going to quote him. I said, "Did you know a revenue agent named C.E. Miller?" And he said, "I didn't just know the son of a bitch. He's the one that took me to jail." So then I was like, boom, now I've got a living witness who knew him back in the day.
Yeah.
So he told me something. We talked for 3 hours, and he was just so much of what he told me I was able to use in my book.
Yeah.
But at the end of the interview, he said something that will resonate with me for the rest of my life. He said, "Son, I want you to understand something about your grandpa." He said, "I was in World War II in the infantry, but your grandpa was the only man I ever met in my life who I would call completely fearless."
Wow.
He said he was fearless and he was relentless.
Yeah.
He said, "You got to understand, the woods were huge in the South back then. We were miles from any road. We all had a gun, and we would have shot your grandpa as soon as looked at him."
Yeah.
But he said he was relentless, and he pretty well single-handedly shut down the moonshine business in the western counties of Georgia.
How was he, your grandpa, after Prohibition? How was he, or wasn't the rest kind of done? Didn't a Prohibition kind of end the legal?
That's what you would think.
Yeah.
But actually, the moonshine business exploded in the 40s after Prohibition.
Right.
And the best I can tell, the reason for that was the Deep South was the Bible Belt. They wouldn't let you open a liquor store in their community. Yeah. So everybody was doing it on the sly. And then I think maybe when guys came back from World War II, a lot of guys wanted a drink that maybe hadn't wanted one before.
Yeah.
So the price of it, this is a real number, and we'll talk about why it's relevant to 2025 in a minute. The price of a gallon of moonshine in 1941 was $20.
Okay.
The annual
that's
farm.
A lot. I mean, let's say it's $4 a gallon for milk right now in our modern context. Right. Yeah.
The annual farm income, yearly farm income average in Georgia that same year, $450.
Wow. Yeah.
So $20 for a gallon of moonshine, your annual income is $450. So what that led to was what was called shot houses. So you've got a house, and you just make a bar in the back, and you'll sell moonshine by the shot, and then you could make $30 or $40 for a gallon.
Yeah.
So when the money went up, the violence went up.
Yeah.
And when the money went up, organized crime got involved.
Yeah.
And then you begin to see in these little southern Bible Belt towns, brothels, gambling houses. So that's when my grandfather was really at the peak of his career. And he was determined to push that stuff out of his community. And he was pretty effective at it.
Yeah. So I guess that still doesn't quite answer my question in terms of, Prohibition ended the legal fight, but apparently there was still some some legal strings on. Yeah.
So it became
moonshine.
After Prohibition, it became a tax crime. So that's why they called my grandfather a revenue agent. He was working actually for the Internal Revenue Service.
I see.
Because these guys were making the liquor and not paying the tax on the liquor, which my grandfather could have cared less about the tax. He cared about the alcoholism and the deplorable sanitary conditions at a lot of these stills. We always see, like the show Moonshiners makes it all fun and games.
Yeah.
There were some skilled moonshiners who made quality product, but there were far more people that were like the meth labs of today. They just wanted to get some kind of alcohol in a jug to sell. They weren't good at what they did. My grandfather said many of the mash pits, when he raided a still, were full of dead rats, teeming with maggots. The moonshine was full of lead. One of his worst crimes, I'm actually writing a sequel about this crime now. In the 50s, he arrested a man named Fat Hardy. You can't make up character names as good as his real name. So Fat Hardy was 353 pounds.
Okay.
And one night, Fat made he screwed up the distillation process and he made toxic methanol instead of ethanol.
Yep.
And he realized his mistake and he sold 56 gallons of it anyway.
Okay.
And in one night, he blinded 323 people and killed 32.
Oh my goodness.
And my grandfather sent him to the electric chair.
Yeah. Rightly so.
Yeah. So it was that harsh.
Yeah.
So you asked earlier a good question. How is it relevant to 2025? I just did a book tour across Georgia and I spoke in some of the communities where these crimes actually occurred.
Okay.
And I said, this is a book about 1946, but it's a book for 2025. And I don't want to be one of those guys that everybody all of a sudden is trying to glom on to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
But there is a parallel here.
Right.
My grandfather recognized he had a skill set that could really be effective at driving moonshine and alcoholism out of his community. He felt like his job was a calling.
Mm-hmm.
So he risked his life night after night. All his work was at night. That's why they called it moonshine. They weren't making this stuff in broad daylight.
Yep. Yeah.
He risked his life night after night. He had people come to his house. This is all in my book, and try to assassinate him for a salary of $2,800 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't getting rich. He was just barely getting by, in fact. But he realized that he had this skill set and he could help kids. When that day that he broke down in front of the Andy Griffith Show, towards the end of that conversation, he started just crying. I had never seen him cry.
Wow. Yep.
And he said, those little children, I just couldn't help them all. I couldn't help them all. He said it about 3 or 4 times. And my mother told me, my mother was still alive. She passed away last year, but she was still alive when I was researching this book. And so she was one of my interviews because she was a little girl when all this was going on. And she said there were a lot of nights he would come home from the job, take off his badge and gun, and just turn his chair to the corner and cry for 20 or 30 minutes.
Oof.
And just try to decompress and then get back to his family.
Yeah. So I take it you're also trying to get at, so you said this is, written in the period of 1946, but it's really for 2025 kind of time frame. Just thinking through the book and what it's about, and you gave me a pre-published copy. I mean, it really does seem like there's kind of a masculinity that was in your grandpa that is just absent in a lot of ways from where we're at now.
Great. That's exactly right. So 2 things, and I should have finished my point better a while ago. I talked about Charlie Kirk. Charlie felt a calling to do what he did, to go to those universities and engage with people that didn't agree with him. My grandfather felt a calling to go after moonshiners. I've got a calling on my life, to tell stories, but as we'll probably get to later in the interview, I've served in, this is my 3rd administration I've served in.
Yeah.
I'm in DC most of the time now. I've got 2 beautiful grandchildren right here in Kentucky that I was 10 miles away from. Well, I'm missing a lot of their growing up because I feel a calling to serve in the energy space where I'm a subject matter expert. Mm-hmm. So I served Trump 45 and I nearly died because I contracted acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
Yeah, right.
And we can get into that story later, but I'm in DC. People asked me when I got the appointment back in July, they said, why do you want to go up there and get involved in that mess? Mm-hmm. And I said, because it has to be done.
Yep.
Somebody that has the skill set and energy that I have, just like Charlie had a skill set, just like my grandfather had a skill set, has to step up and do the work that has to be done.
Yeah. What, now you said number 1, number 2 was number 2.
Calling, and then 2 was the masculinity thing that you talked about.
Yeah.
So one of the areas when let me go back to when you and I were last on the air together. I was working for Governor Bevin.
That's right.
Governor Bevin was without any doubt the most pro-life governor in the history of Kentucky.
Yep.
He did a lot to save a lot of babies.
Mm-hmm.
So we were running against Andy Beshear.
Yep.
A Baptist pastor, and I'll leave his name out of it. I don't have permission to use his name, wrote a very powerful letter endorsing Governor Bevin and telling his church members it would be immoral of you to not vote for Matt Bevin.
Wow.
We know what Andy Beshear is going to do on the life issue.
Yep.
And so I took his letter. He sent it to the Capitol, and I took his letter to the Southern Baptist Convention, various people who you would know by name. I took it to a lot of Southern Baptist pastors. Nobody would touch it.
Wow. Wow.
So they sat on the sidelines and sat quietly, partly because of the influence of Russ Moore, who was still in the fold at the time.
Yeah.
And who was supposed to be a friend of Governor Bevan. They never said a word. So we lost Andy Beshear by a few thousand votes.
Yep.
And abortion clinics got opened back up. Not many, thank God, because of the legislature.
Yep.
And the legislature, by the way, was flipped to Republican for the first time in Kentucky history because of the work of Matt Bevan.
Wow.
So because so many pastors had gotten so, you know it, you guys talk about it all the time. It's really a big theme of your show. Had gotten so marshmallowy and so squishy.
Soft. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we've gotten in the mess we're in. And thank God he got us Donald Trump elected the second time.
Yeah.
But we were on the verge of losing this republic, as I'm sure you know. And the squishiness, the feminization of the male culture has all contributed to that. So I'm happy to show my grandfather as a man's man. One time I was having a hamburger with him. By then I was probably about 14. We were sitting there eating a hamburger in a little diner there in Georgia, and a deputy came in to eat. And I said, Pop, I always called him Pop. I said, Pop, why didn't you get back into law enforcement? He actually got into a big conflict with the governor of Georgia in 1952, which is all going to be in my sequel that I'm writing.
Okay.
And he got fired for political reasons, for standing his ground.
Yeah.
And I said, why didn't you get back into law enforcement after that? He said, son, back when I was doing the job, if I had to lay hands on a man and make him respect the badge, I just did it.
Yep.
I was never questioned.
Yep.
And he said, these men now, the way they have to do the job is you can get yourself killed.
Yeah.
Because they're not allowed to make people respect the badge.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I want to drill in a little bit to the context here, because I got some follow-up questions around this. Okay. So it sounds like he started around 1930. I forget when did Prohibition
end?
Yeah.
I think it was 36.
Okay. And so he started during Prohibition and then went through about, it sounds like 1946.
52.
52, excuse me. Oh, so he was 22 years doing this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I confused you on the math. That's my fault, not yours. He started in 38, and he caught just a little bit at the end as Prohibition was closing out.
Okay.
And then he went to 52.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. And then, so it sounds like, you know, are you also trying to make it? Are you, as partly what happened in the context here, that there's a context or difference between, let's say, moonshine and a regular glass of wine, or was moonshine a particular kind of alcohol that was having a particular kind of effect that was causing a particular kind of societal problems?
Correct.
Maybe just kind of flesh that out. Describe that a little bit for me.
Well, moonshine was a very high proof. They went for about 105 proof. So it would have been one of your strongest liquors even today.
Yeah.
It wasn't very refined. It wasn't mellowed in oak barrels like good old Kentucky bourbon.
Right.
And so it had a lot of bite to it. It would get you really drunk really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had a lot of it was toxic because of lead. A lot of it was methanol mixed in.
How was lead getting into it? How was lead getting into it?
Their stills were so poorly built. Some of them.
Okay. Yeah.
The good ones, and like if you go down to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, there's a place called Old Smoky Mountain Moonshine. It's legal. Yeah. They've got a beautiful copper still.
Yeah.
That's a proper still.
Yeah.
And some of them were. Some of the guys were really craftsmen and they prided themselves on their stills. But a lot of them were old car radiators that had lead in the solder.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just whatever they could make a still out of.
Wow.
And so lead would get in it that way. Then I told you about the mash that had a lot of bacteria, dead animals.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It was environmentally a disaster because when they did make methanol, and it happened in fact, you would make a little bit of methanol with every run until your temperature got right. They would dump that into the streams. And my grandfather said he found a lot of stills because he would just follow the dead animals along the stream. Or a deer or a rabbit came to get a drink of water and it poisoned them.
Yep.
So that it had bacterial stuff in it. It had lead in it. But the worst thing was the methanol content was too high sometimes. And you would get what's called shaky leg. which was major nerve damage, where you would just have tremors for years after that.
Yeah.
Or it would attack the optic nerve. A lot of people went blind. Some temporarily, some permanently.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
and that's all due to the methanol, and that's all due to the methanol in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the worst case scenario was that if the methanol was high enough, it was fatal. Wow. So people did die from drinking moonshine. Yeah. Don't let anybody fool you.
Now, Now, why was moonshine, let's say, impacting family life in a way that, let's say, beer or other forms of legal alcohol was not?
Mainly because of the availability. There were so many people in the South making it. That was the drug of choice in the Deep South for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And beer and wine was hard to get because there weren't that many liquor stores in the South, especially in the Bible communities and small towns. Yeah. But they could go out in the woods and buy from, Junior or Slim or somebody. Right. And they would, a lot of them, the way it would work is you'd leave your money under a rock in the forest somewhere, and you'd come out the next day and there'd be a gallon of moonshine waiting on you. Yeah, so it was really clandestine. You could do it and still be respected in the community because it was always hidden. Yeah. And it was so available. The main part was the availability. Even though it was expensive, at least you could obtain it. It was hard to get a 6-pack in the South back then. Yeah. Wow. And you didn't get near as drunk from a 6-pack.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to give you my caveat yet, but I'm going to ask this question here. Or I guess my caveat. So to me, prohibition should have never been a thing, and the government never should have made alcohol illegal.
No, I agree.
I'm a Presbyterian. And that the government regulating alcohol so much is actually what caused the moonshine industry to spring up. And then, of course, in the South, like you already said, it's like, well, it was hard to get good alcohol anyways because, the South had all these, what I'd call teetotaler laws back in the, 30s and 40s, and wouldn't let certain stores open. I remember growing up in Texas, you had your dry counties and your wet counties and all that stuff in Texas. And I remember that growing up. I don't even think it's a thing anymore in Texas, but so the government basically incentivized this really, bad concoction and, and sinful behavior. So I guess, how do you, like I said, I got some follow up here, but how do you kind of reconcile like what we think kind of biblically, wine should be, alcohol should be legitimate to buy, make, and sell kind of thing versus the period where your dad was fighting, or your grandpa, excuse me, was fighting, moonshine and stuff like that?
Just at least when it was legal, it was regulated and it was clean and it was not poison.
Yeah.
So those are the main reasons. And I left out a detail. I was just thinking of it as you were asking your question. Another reason moonshine was so much more prevalent than other alcohols, it was hard to grow grapes or hops or barley in the South.
Yep.
Everybody could grow corn. And they grew a lot of corn. And so that was, the raw materials were more readily available too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it was mostly just that it became less toxic and less lethal. My grandfather was always against alcohol in any form his whole life, but he would not have been raiding liquor stores.
Right.
Because it wasn't a crime. It wasn't a tax crime, but he didn't have the moral disgust at that he had seen, because he had seen so much damage from moonshine. And is mainly too, that even if you got good moonshine your whole life, if you were a 5-year-old kid in the South in the 40s and your dad was an alcoholic, you had no shot. Because the men were the breadwinners. That's where the culture was at the time. And if he was drunk all the time and couldn't work, and this is also a story that's told in my book, then you just went hungry, or you didn't have clothes to wear. A lot of these kids, I mean, it was literally third world. He talked to me a lot about how many kids would be covered in lice. Really, the South had not anywhere near recovered from Reconstruction by the 30s and 40s. The North, the carpetbagger guys, I don't want to get into too much politics of this, but they deliberately harmed the South, even the school systems, as a form of punishment into the 1890s and early 1900s. And that damage was still being felt even in the 40s.
So here's maybe in this, honestly, I haven't thought through this too much, but here's maybe an analogous situation. So I think the government shouldn't regulate alcohol. They have no authority to do it. I think alcohol can be a great blessing and a great sin. It's a sharp thing God's given the world, and sharp things can be used for great glory, and sharp things can be used for great damage. You think of, sex in marriage and sex outside of marriage, same kind of thing. But I could also see, like we're in a situation, I'd say, with marijuana. Like, I don't want marijuana in the state of Idaho to be legal. It's not right now, but it's in Colorado, and it's screwing things up in Colorado. So I could see a situation where maybe, given the immaturity of the people, I might, as a governor of Idaho or something, where I think marijuana should be legal. I don't like, whatever, it's sin for sure, but you don't regulate. There's a difference between crimes and sins and all that discussion. But I could see a situation where it's like, okay, we're so immature, you don't get your driver's license right now, or we're so immature, you don't get access to alcohol or marijuana or whatever, just because like you can't handle it. Now, I want to approach that conversation in such a way where it's like the government's not turning into like some sort of mother hen either,
right? Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I guess that could be an analogous situation to the 40s and 60s, 50s, and the 40s or 30s and 40s in the South, where it's like, okay, maybe for a period of time, we actually got to go hard on this. Just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said, but going hard. Let me hang on that for a minute. So,
well, what I mean by going hard is like your grandpa was going hard. I mean, he was tracking, he was finding, he was, being physical to deal with the situation, all that stuff.
So without spoiling the story, when people read my book, they'll see a chapter about something that occurred when he was a little boy. And that's what gave him a hatred for moonshine. And so once he found out they were hiring guys to go after moonshiners, he was already looking for a fight anyway. And so he was strictly in it for the moral aspects of it. And I'll let the reader decide, did he go too far? Was he too focused on this? Personally, I don't think so, but some readers may. George Washington, one of the greatest men that ever lived, made moonshine. Yeah. He probably made really good moonshine, but he had a still. I've been to it. I've visited it.
Oh, really? And, cool.
Yeah. So, I could see both sides of the moral argument of the existence of moonshine itself. But where my grandfather went with it in his mind was, if I don't have moonshine, I won't have kids get hurt. Was he right? Was he wrong? I don't know. I didn't live in that time period. He did. Yeah. But that's the way he approached it, and that's why he was so driven. That moonshiner I was telling you about, he told me one night my grandfather chased him on foot in the deepest woods of Georgia for 12 miles before he finally got away from him. Wow. And he said, I got away that time, but he got me later. Yep. And we haven't talked about so there's two principal cases that I talked about in this book. The Upson County Liquor Gang is one. I showed you that commendation. The other one is a very famous murder. A man named John Wallace murdered my grandfather's informant.
Wow.
In broad daylight in front of a restaurant full of people. It was depicted in a movie called Murder in Coweta County.
Okay.
And you can watch it on YouTube for free right now. It was a made-for-TV movie. Johnny Cash played the sheriff, Johnny Cash the singer. If you can guess who played the killer, I will give you 2 free books.
Oh, my goodness.
You only got 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to get.
Yeah.
I'll give you a hint, but then you don't get the free books.
Okay, give me a hint.
It's somebody we've already talked about in this interview.
Who did we already talk about?
Andy Griffith.
Oh, really?
Andy Griffith, the only time he ever played a killer, he played John Wallace in Murder in Coweta County.
Wow.
It's kind of campy to watch now, but it is interesting. The whole case is so interesting.
Yeah.
But they left all the moonshine part of the investigation out of it. And so when that movie came out, I'm sorry. When the novel came out, the novel became a New York Times bestseller with the same title, Murder in Coweta County. I was reading it. It was in the 70s, and I was in my grandfather's house reading it. And he came by and saw me reading it, and he said, "Boy, what are you reading that crap for?" And I said, "Pop, you're in this book," and he is talked about the book a couple times,
Yeah.
far too briefly, but he's
Yeah.
because he was much more involved than. And he
Yeah.
said, "Boy, that lady don't know nothing." He said, "Sit that book down, and you come back to my room." So
Yeah.
I got a visual aid for you here.
Yep.
He took me back to his room, and he got this, which is really just a tackle box, but he had a lock on it here.
Yeah.
And he opened it up, and he starts going through papers, a lot of which he burned the month he died, because he had a lot of information about his informants in there that he didn't want anybody to know. He wanted to protect them.
Wow.
But he pulled out a piece of ladies' stationery. So remember, Andy Griffith played a murderer named John Wallace. It was like a moonshine kingpin. Ruled an entire county.
Okay.
He was kind of a southern version of organized crime boss.
Yep.
So he pulls out this piece of ladies' stationery. There's flowers all on the margins. It's written on in pencil. It says, "Agent Miller, it is urgent that we speak. Meet me at my barn at midnight. Come along."
Yeah.
If you look at the cover of my book, I'm depicting that midnight meeting that my grandfather did go to.
Yeah.
This was a year before the murder. And when I won't spoil the story, this is actually only very early in the book when I talk about this. Okay. And by the way, the meeting is one of the most historically accurate chapters in the book. Okay. Because this is a novel based on actual events. But I would say about 60% of my book is true. Okay. And 40% is fiction that filled it in.
Yeah.
So my grandfather pulls up to this barn at midnight. I was just at this barn a month ago. Yeah. I've gone there frequently when I was researching, and I go back just for memories.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of nowhere, Georgia today.
Okay.
I can't imagine how remote it was in 1946.
Yeah, right.
So he pulls up, Wallace gets in the car with him, and I'll summarize. He said, "Agent Miller, I want you to run Wilson Turner out of the state of Georgia." Wilson Turner would later become the victim. And my grandfather got angry because he knew the local sheriff, who was my grandfather's cousin, was corrupt and was doing whatever John Wallace told him to do.
Yeah.
So he was offended that he thought Wallace thought he could boss my grandfather around. Yeah. So he said, "Well, John, I'm not in the business of running people out of the state just because you say so. I'm more in the business of making liquor cases against them."
Yeah.
And Wallace says, "Well, do that then, because he's making liquor on my property without my permission." And see, my grandfather had arrested both Wallace in 38, and Wallace did a year for it, for moonshine, and he had arrested the victim, Turner, in 45, and he did 6 months for it.
Okay.
So he already knew both of them.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, do that then. He's making liquor on my property without my permission." And my grandfather, this guy who'd already killed other people, and my grandfather knew it, turned to him and stood him down, which nobody talked to this guy like this. He said, "Wallace, you're a liar." He said, "He's not making liquor without your permission. He's making liquor as your employee. You've got a big still somewhere that I haven't found yet, and eventually I'm going to find it. You won't have to worry about him being on your property anymore. I'm going to put you both in the penitentiary."
Yeah.
And Wallace just went into a rage. Yeah. And he said, "Well, if you won't run him out of the state, I'll kill him."
Yeah.
And he said, "I was going to kill him the other day. He was fishing in my pond," because Turner was a sharecropper on his property. Okay. He said, "He was fishing in my pond." He said, "I slid my pistol in my pocket, drove down there." He said, "I wasn't going to argue with him or nothing. I was just going to walk up and shoot him in the head."
Yep.
And he said, "But I got down there and his little 3-year-old boy was fishing with a cane pole, and I didn't want to shoot him in front of the little boy." So that's how my story starts.
Wow.
So the involvement and how the murder happened, and the real investigative part of it is Georgia is a corpus delicti state. That in Latin, that means no body, no murder. So Wallace hid the guy's body so effectively, they couldn't find it for weeks. It became the biggest manhunt in Georgia history to this day. Not hunting for the killer, hunting for the body.
That's right.
And my grandfather found the body. So that's where my grandfather really came in strong on the case.
Yeah. Okay. So let's end here. Do you have a small chapter or a little taste you can give us before we go?
So I've written 5 books, and I've written hundreds of speeches for politicians, including a couple for President Trump. Mm-hmm. And I'm more proud of these 4 pages probably than anything I've ever written.
Okay.
After the young man was attacked in front of this restaurant, nobody knew if he had lived or died. He was beaten really badly in front of some people, and then they threw him in a car and took off with him.
Okay.
My grandfather was 2 counties away on another case. he had been looking for this informant. The informant had been missing for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
And my grandfather was afraid that he had endangered this young man because he was my grandfather's informant.
Uh-huh.
So he was trying to, like heck, to find him. So this conversation I'm about to read you took place just a few hours after the assault with a truck stop cook who witnessed the assault and my grandfather. By then, all the sheriff's deputies, the sheriff, all those, they had already dusted for fingerprints and gathered evidence and left. So they're just sitting there. And I just went to that restaurant is still there. It's closed now, but I went there a few days ago just to look at it. So my grandfather goes racing. He hears somebody was assaulted at this. It was called the Sunset Truck Stop. He goes hauling butt to the Sunset Truck Stop. By the time he gets there, the investigators have left, and it's just him and the cook. So the chapter is called "It Rattles a Man." I should have done more. That thought kept rolling around over and over in my head as I stood in the dusty parking lot of the Sunset Truck Stop. I had seen Wallace and Sybil outside the courthouse some 20 miles from here, and I had trusted that Sheriff Collier would question them and find out what they were up to. My priority at that time had to be following up on another lead on the liquor case. Chase around after Wallace within Greenville city limits hadn't been my job or my jurisdiction. None of that mattered, however, as I stood here now in the dusty parking lot of the Sunset Truck Stop, looking at a combination of clay, sand, and what I suspected was Wilson Turner's blood. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
I walked over to an outdoor cooler, lifted a bottle of RC Cola out, and popped the top on the installed opener. I'd go in and pay before I left. I stepped over to a bench alongside the door of the diner and plopped down like a sack of flour. At the very least, I needed an RC and a minute or two to gather my wits. Because at this point in the book, he's been really going hard investigating and trying to find this guy.
Yep.
I pushed my Stetson back on my head, and that's why I've got this on. He wore a hat just like this. Mopped my forehead with my handkerchief and took a long draw off the cold bottle. Just then, Steve Smith, the owner of the diner and truck stop, let the screen door slap closed behind him. I reached in my pocket and flipped him a dime for the RC. He caught the coin in midair. He sat down on the bench beside me. Well, this situation has killed my business for the rest of the day, that's for sure. He looked at me and tried to manage a chuckle, but neither one of us was in a laughing mood. Your name's Miller, ain't it? Revenuer from over at Talbot County? I believe you've been in here to eat before. I have, I answered. Then holding the pop in my left hand, I leaned over and shook his with my right. You kind of look like you're done in. You know anything about all this mess? More than I care to, I said. I said no more, and he realized I wasn't going to share any additional information. What do you think of Sheriff Potts? He asked. That's who Johnny Cash played, by the way.
Okay.
I only worked with him a couple times. He seems like a good lawman. Yeah, Smith said. Most folks around here think a lot of him. I drank some more RC. I was going to do something about Turner and Wallace. I just wasn't sure what. At the same time, I had the best tip I'd ever had on the location of Daniel Godfrey Still. We were quiet for a long time. Then Smith, staring blankly into the distance, spoke up. All right, I want to take a quick aside here. I wanted to capture the heart of these men. This is why I wrote fiction based on actual events instead of nonfiction.
Yeah.
Because these are two men of the 1940s. They haven't seen violence on their television screen their entire life like you and I have. They haven't seen ultraviolet, bloody movies. And they just saw this guy get the you-know-what beat out of him. Or the cook did. But my grandfather's also shaken because he's been looking for him for so long.
Yep.
So the cook says, it rattles a man, he said. Man like you might get numb to it. Man in your business might get used to seeing things like what I saw today. I never seen nothing like it, I can tell you. Wish I hadn't seen it still. I've seen some things, I said, but I ain't used to it. I pray to the Lord I never get used to it. Steve shook his head for a long time. He was doing what good people do in these situations. He was replaying it in his head. It would replay for a long time. It would never fully go away. It was an awful thing they done to that boy, he said. He fought. I tell you, he fought like a wild animal, but he wasn't no size. I wish now I had done more, but I was so stunned I couldn't think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean about wishing you'd done more, I said. He didn't seem to notice. That bald fellow, the one who claimed he was a guard from the Greenville jail, He was in a rage, man, a rage like I ain't never seen before. He wailed on that boy, first with a pistol, then Steve Smith, with his big, thick wrists and massive forearms resting on his apron, began to cry. He gathered himself again. Then he took a sawed-off shotgun that other white-haired man was holding. A big, bald-headed man and a man with white hair, I thought. That's Wallace and Sybil, all right. Smith went on with a story that I didn't want to hear, but that I had to hear. He took that shotgun and he came overhand with it like he was going to chop wood, and he brought them double barrels down on that boy's head. The boy was holding on to the sides of the open of the car door, and he was screaming. Man, I mean, he was screaming, somebody help me, help me. They're going to kill me, he says. Smith's voice broke again, and he wiped vigorously at his eye with the corner of his white apron. He had his feet up on the edge of that floorboard and was holding on with his hands on either side of the door, and they both couldn't get him in that car. But when he hit him with that shotgun, it went off, and Agent Miller, that boy went limp as a dish rag. I felt my throat starting to burn, and I grit my teeth. I suddenly saw Mrs. Turner frantic in her kitchen. She was still living in Wallace's sharecropper shack. Somebody was going to have to tell her what had happened to her husband. Somebody had to protect her. Steve was bent over, elbows resting on his knees. His head kept shaking from side to side slowly, trying to get his mind around what he had just witnessed. I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed. It'll be hard for you for a long time. You just have to go on with your daily work. Keep living your life. Stay busy. The busier you are, the less time you'll have to replay what's going through your head right now. He looked over at me for a few seconds with what seemed like relief and maybe appreciation in his eyes. I've got to go, I said. I'm not on this case, but I'm on another one that's related. I can work mine and maybe help find this boy, if he's alive somewhere. I stood up, put my Stetson on firmly, and took a few steps towards my car. I heard Smith speak up again. I didn't turn to face him this time. His voice suddenly sounded like a lost child's. Agent Miller, he said weakly, that bald man, he jumped in the back seat on top of that boy. I didn't tell the sheriff this, and I don't know why. Maybe I was ashamed. But he jumped in on top of that boy, and the boy was all limp on the floor. The other man, the white-haired man, he ran around and drove out of here screeching tires and all. And I looked up into that back window as they headed back to Meriwether County, and Agent Miller, that bald man had the boy pulled up by the hair of his head, and he just wouldn't stop beating him with that pistol. I never saw such rage in a man. I never saw such hate. He wailed on that poor limp boy all the way up the road till I couldn't see him no more. He took a deep but ragged breath. He was trying not to sob. Something like that, Agent Miller. It rattles a man. I looked down the highway toward the Meriwether County line. All this trouble had moved back there, across that imaginary line that bisected the pavement. It was a line I knew I had to cross, and trouble that I knew I was going to get in the middle of. It was late afternoon, and the heat waves were shimmering off the pavement. The sun was white hot. Yeah, I said, I know what you mean.
Very nice. Let me read this real quick, Chris. Do you have a podcast, or are you thinking about starting one? Does your church have a podcast feed for your sermons? Well, then Dropwave.io is for you. Cancel culture is like walking a thin glass bridge over the Grand Canyon. Every step you take could get you killed or canceled. Since the beginning, CrossPolitic has been working on being anti-fragile, so no matter what happens, our content can still be delivered to your TV and to your podcast. Me and my friend Jeremy, that's me, Gabe, the water boy, and Jeremy, we have been working on building a podcast hosting solution, that's Dropwave.io, for rowdy platforms like CrossPolitic, so that you can be confident your podcast will never fail or fall through the glass bridge. Dropwave offers seamless onboarding for shows that have been around for years to easy-to-use solutions for starting your own podcast. Dropwave will track all your shows, downloads by city, state, country, and offers its network and enterprise packages for solutions like the Fight Laugh Feast network. Free to speak, free to podcast, free to start your journey now at Dropwave.io. There's even free packages, I think, for if you're just dropping something like 4 hours a month or something along those lines. Go to Dropwave.io and sign up and even transition your podcast over there. Chris, so go to Amazon. Amazon's the best place to find Moonshine Over Georgia. Is that correct?
Correct. And I also, if you like listening to books in your car, I hired an actor to play my grandfather who absolutely crushed it. I directed and produced, and he really took coaching and let me tell him how my grandfather sounded. And
So
he
it's
really
an
got
Audible.
me-
It's
yeah,
on Audible.
Audible and Spotify, and
Sweet.
he does a tremendous job with it. Obviously, I love for everybody to read my written words on the page, but if you a busy lifestyle and you want to listen to it in your car, it's a great audiobook.
Super cool. So that's Amazon or Audible. Moonshine Over Georgia. Thank you, Chris Skates for joining Cross Politics Spotlight, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Next Monday, every Monday, our show drops with our Cross Politics Spotlight. So tune in, look for Mondays.